It started as a normal morning until I stared at the empty parking spot where my first car belonged. 5 minutes later, my mother casually said they had given my keys to my sister. Assuming I would not mind, it was no joke. Between calls from the police and insurance agents, I realized that surviving meant fighting my own blood. My entire life had simply been a robbery that lasted 29 years. My name is Cecilia Harvey, and 29 years of playing the role of the good daughter died the moment I stepped onto the concrete floor of my apartment complex garage. The air in Maple Ridge, Indiana, has a specific bite to it in the early morning, a damp chill that settles into your bones. But the cold that washed over me had nothing to do with the weather. It was the freezing, hollow sensation of staring at parking spot number 4B and seeing absolutely nothing. The space was empty, not just empty, but mockingly so. There were faint, dark tracks on the gray cement where the tires had been, the moisture still clinging to the dust, suggesting that the vehicle had been there recently. My silver sedan, the one with less than 3,000 miles on the odometer, was gone. I blinked, hard, assuming my brain was misfiring. I actually took a few steps back and looked up at the painted number on the concrete pillar, confirming I was on the right level. I was. I walked to the edge of the spot, my heels clicking sharply in the silence of the garage. I spun around, my eyes scanning the rows of cars belonging to my neighbors, a blue truck, a beige compact, a red minivan, no silver sedan. Panic is a physical thing. It started in my stomach, a hard knot of nausea, and shot up into my throat. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, irregular rhythm that made my hands shake. I started running. I ran down the length of the row, checking behind the concrete supports, checking the level above and the level below, gasping for air that felt too thin. I tried to rationalize the irrational. Did I park it somewhere else last night? No. I remembered pulling in. I remembered the song playing on the radio. I remembered locking it and listening for the beep. It was stolen. That was the only explanation. My brand new car, the one I had spent 3 years saving the down payment for, the one that represented my promotion to operations manager at Northbridge Logistics, was gone. I had only made 3 payments on it. I stopped running, leaning a hand against a rough concrete pillar to steady myself. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. My phone was already in my hand, my thumb hovering over the keypad to dial the police. I was trembling, the adrenaline making my vision blur slightly. Just as I was about to type the first digit, the screen lit up. The name Mom flashed across the display. I stared at it for a second. The timing felt surreal, almost divine, as if she knew I was in crisis. I swiped the green button, pressing the phone to my ear, my voice cracking before I even got a full word out. "Mom!" I choked out, the word sounding small and terrified in the echoing garage. "Mom! You won't believe this. My car. It's gone. Someone stole my car." I expected a gasp. I expected her voice to pitch up in shared alarm. I expected the immediate smothering comfort she always offered when something went wrong in her world. Instead, there was a pause, a calm, almost bored silence on the other end. "Oh, Cecilia, calm down." My mother, Elaine, said. Her voice was steady, casual, the same tone she used when telling me she had bought a new set of curtains. "The car isn't lost. It hasn't been stolen. Your father and I gave the spare key to your sister last night. Brooke needed it to get to work this morning." The world did not stop spinning, but it certainly tilted on its axis. My brain could not process the sentence. The words were English, but they made no sense in the order she had arranged them. "What?" I whispered. "Brooke," she repeated, slower this time, as if I were the one having trouble with basic comprehension. "Her car is in the shop again, and she has that interview today, or maybe it was a shift at the salon, I forget, but she needed a way to get there. We gave her your spare key." The nausea in my stomach turned into something hot and sharp. "You gave her my car?" I asked, my voice rising, echoing off the low ceiling. "Mom, that is my car. My name is on the title. My name is on the registration. I pay the insurance. I pay the loan. You gave my car to Brooke without asking me? We didn't want to wake you, she said, dismissive, brushing away my outrage like it was a fly buzzing near her face. Your father stopped by your apartment late last night. He let himself in with the emergency code you gave us. He got the spare key from the hook in the kitchen. You were asleep. And we figured you wouldn't mind helping your sister out. You know how hard things have been for her lately. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just the car anymore. A horrifying image flashed in my mind. My father, Raymond, punching the code into my door in the middle of the night. Him walking into my dark apartment while I was sleeping in the next room, unaware and vulnerable. Him opening my kitchen drawer, rifling through my things, taking my property, and walking out. Dad came into my apartment while I was sleeping? I asked, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. He came inside and took my keys? That is breaking and entering. Mom, that is theft. Oh, stop it, she snapped, her tone hardening. Don't use those legal words with your family. It is not theft. It is borrowing. We are family. Cecilia, we don't ask for permission to help each other. We just do it. Why do you always have to be so rigid? Rigid. That was the word they always used when I had boundaries. Rigid, cold, calculating. I looked at the empty parking spot again. The tire tracks were drying. I thought about Brooke. I thought about my sister behind the wheel of my brand new sedan. The car that still smelled like factory leather and pride. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Brooke has totaled 4 cars in 5 years. That is an exaggeration, she countered immediately. It is a fact, I cut her off. 2 years ago, she drove her Civic into a median strip because she was screaming at her ex-boyfriend on the speakerphone. Last year, she backed into a light pole in a Target parking lot because she was fixing her lipstick in the rearview mirror. 6 months ago, she rear-ended a minivan because she was texting. She is a liability. She is dangerous. She is going through a rough patch, my mother yelled, her voice finally losing its composure, shifting into defense mode. She is trying to get her life back on track. Why can't you just support her? You have a good job. You have money. You can take an Uber or catch a bus for a few days. Why is everything always about possessions with you? I stood there, stunned into silence by the sheer audacity of the manipulation. I worked 60 hours a week at Northbridge Logistics. I managed a team of 40 people. I solved supply chain crises before breakfast. I did not have money because I was lucky. I had money because I showed up. I had this car because I built the credit score to buy it. And what happens if she hits someone? I asked, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. What happens if she crashes my car? Mom, the insurance is in my name. The liability is on me. If she hurts someone, I get sued. Did you think about that when you handed her the keys? You always assume the worst, she scoffed. She is just driving to work. Nothing is going to happen, and if something small happens, we will handle it. We are a family. We prioritize people over money, unlike some people. The accusation hung in the air. I was the some people. I was the villain because I wanted to be the only person driving the $28,000 machine I was paying for. I need my car back, I said. Tell her to bring it back. Now. She is already at work, Mom said, her voice breezy again, now that she felt she had won the moral argument. She will bring it back in a few days when her car is fixed. Just deal with it. Cecilia, don't make a scene. I have to go. Your father wants coffee. The line went dead. I lowered the phone from my ear and stared at the screen. The call had lasted 3 minutes and 14 seconds. In that time, my reality had fractured. I looked around the garage again. It felt different now. It wasn't just a place where my car should be. It was the scene of a crime that no one wanted to call a crime. I closed my eyes and pictured my father entering my apartment. I felt a wave of violations so intense it made my skin crawl. They didn't see me as an adult woman. They didn't see my apartment as my home. They saw it as an extension of their property, a storage unit they could raid whenever the golden child, Brooke, needed resources. I walked over to where my car should have been. I stood right in the center of the oil stain. If a stranger had broken into my house, taken my keys, and driven off with my car, the police would be on their way right now. There would be a report. There would be an investigation. It would be called Grand Theft Auto. But because it was Raymond and Elaine Harvey giving the keys to Brooke Harvey, it was called Helping Family. I looked at the time on my phone. It was 7:45 in the morning. I was going to be late for work. I had a meeting with the regional directors at 9 o'clock. My thumb hovered over the contact list again. I scrolled down. Dad, home, Brooke. I scrolled past them. I stared at the contact I had saved years ago but never used. Police, non-emergency. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Don't be rigid. Don't make a scene. But then I thought about the $350 I sent to the bank every month. I thought about the late nights at the warehouse ensuring shipments went out on time. I thought about Brooke, who had likely tossed her fast food wrappers on my pristine floor mats by now, driving my car with the same reckless entitlement she applied to every other aspect of her life. I stood in the empty space, the wind biting through my coat. This wasn't borrowing. You ask to borrow. You wait for a yes to borrow. Taking without asking is stealing. I realized then that the only difference between a criminal and my family was that the criminal wouldn't try to convince me I was a bad person for wanting my things back. My finger shook, but I pressed the call button. I walked back into my apartment. The silence of the rooms hitting me differently than it had the night before. It no longer felt like sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene where the evidence had been wiped clean. I locked the door and engaged the deadbolt, a reflexive action that felt pathetic given that my parents knew the keypad code. I would have to change that code immediately. I leaned my back against the door and stared at my phone screen, my thumb hovering over the contact list. The names scrolled past in a blur of black text on white background. Mom, Dad, Brooke. I hated that they were at the top of my favorites list. I hated that my digital life prioritized them just as much as my emotional life did, even when they treated me like an accessory to their own main events. My finger stopped on the contact I had added 3 years ago when I first moved into this complex, purely for safety reasons. Police, non-emergency. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, trapped in a paralyzing debate that was tearing my insides apart. On one shoulder sat the obedient daughter, the one trained for 29 years to keep the peace, to swallow her anger, to accommodate Brooke's chaos because Brooke just feels things more deeply than you do. Cecilia. That version of me was screaming that calling the cops on my own flesh and blood was the nuclear option, a betrayal that could never be undone. On the other shoulder stood the woman who had worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years. The woman who had a credit score of 780 and a car loan of $28,000 attached to her Social Security number. That woman was terrified. That woman knew that loyalty did not pay the bills. A memory clawed its way up from the back of my mind. Sharp and vivid. I was 16 years old. I had saved my allowance and babysitting money for 6 months to buy a bicycle. A teal mountain bike with dual suspension. It was the first expensive thing I had ever owned. 3 days after I bought it, I came home from school to find the garage empty. Mom had told me, with that same infuriating casualness, that Brooke had borrowed it to ride to the park to meet a boy. Brooke walked home 4 hours later, alone. She had left the bike unlocked outside a convenience store while she went in to buy a slushie, and when she came out, it was gone. I remembered screaming. I remembered the hot tears of injustice, but mostly, I remembered my father putting a heavy hand on my shoulder and saying, "It's just a bike. Cecilia, don't be so selfish. Your sister is already upset about losing it. Don't make her feel worse." They comforted her. They comforted the thief, and I was left with nothing but a lesson that I had evidently refused to learn until today. In the Harvey household, my property was community property, but Brooke's feelings were sacred ground. I pushed off the door and walked to the kitchen island. I opened my banking app. Face ID logged me in, and the numbers glared back at me in bright green and red. I navigated to the auto loan section. The remaining balance was $27,942. I stared at that number until it blurred. If Brooke totaled the car tonight, which was statistically probable given her history, The insurance company would cut a check to the lien holder, but if there was a gap, or if they found out an unauthorized driver with a terrible record was behind the wheel, they might deny the claim entirely. I would be paying nearly $30,000 for a pile of scrap metal that I didn't even get to wreck myself. The nausea returned, violent and acidic. I could not afford to be the good daughter. The good daughter would go bankrupt. I decided to give them one last chance. It was a foolish hope, but I needed to know I had tried everything before I pulled the trigger. I opened my text thread with Mom. My fingers shook as I typed. I need the car and the keys back in my possession by 5 o'clock today. I am not asking. If it is not here, I am taking further steps. I watched the 3 little dots dance on the screen almost immediately. She was looking at her phone. The reply came through less than a minute later. You are being incredibly dramatic. Brooke needs it for the week until hers is fixed. Stop only thinking about yourself. 1 week without a car won't kill you. Use your legs. I stared at the words. Stop only thinking about yourself. The gaslighting was so precise, so practiced. It was almost impressive. They had taken my $28,000 asset, stranded me, and violated my home. Yet I was the selfish one for wanting it back. That text message was the severance package. It was the final proof that no amount of reasoning, pleading, or explaining would ever make them respect me. To them, I was not a person. I was a resource. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the stale air of the apartment, and tapped the call button on the non-emergency line. The phone rang twice. Dispatch, how can I help you? A woman's voice asked, crisp and professional. I need to report a stolen vehicle, I said. My voice wavered on the word stolen, the guilt surging up my throat like bile. It felt like a lie, even though it was the truth. The vehicle was taken from my residence at the Maple Ridge Apartments. Do you know who took the vehicle, ma'am? I closed my eyes. This was the moment. I could say I didn't know. I could say it was a stranger. But that would be a false report, a crime in itself. Yes, I said, opening my eyes and staring at the empty hook where my spare key usually hung. My sister took it, but she did not have my permission, and she is refusing to return it. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up to the curb outside my building. I watched from the window as a female officer stepped out. She adjusted her belt, scanned the building numbers, and walked toward the entrance with a purposeful stride. She looked like someone who dealt in facts, not feelings. I needed that. I met her in the lobby. Her badge read Officer Mason. She was younger than I expected, maybe around my age, with her hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Ms. Harvey? She asked, pulling a small notepad from her pocket. Yes, I said. Thank you for coming. We walked out to the garage so I could show her the empty spot. It felt ridiculous, showing someone nothing, but she treated it with gravity. She noted the time, the location, and the details of the vehicle. Okay, let's get the narrative straight, Officer Mason said, her pen poised over the paper. You are the sole owner of the vehicle? Yes, my name is the only one on the title and the loan. And you did not give keys to anyone? No, I said. My parents have an emergency code to my apartment. My father came in while I was sleeping, took the spare key, and gave it to my sister. Officer Mason paused. She looked up from her notepad, her expression unreadable but intense. Okay, that adds a layer of complexity. But the law is the law. If you did not authorize the taking of the vehicle, it is unauthorized use. She capped her pen for a moment and looked me dead in the eye. I need to be very clear with you, Ms. Harvey, she said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming less bureaucratic and more human. You are talking about filing a criminal report against immediate family members. Once I file this, it goes into the system. If we find the car and she is driving it, we will pull her over. We will arrest her. She will be charged with a felony or a high-level misdemeanor depending on the value of the car. The district attorney picks it up, not you. You cannot just call us tomorrow and say, never mind, because your mom cried on the phone. Are you sure you want to go down this road? The question hung heavy in the damp garage air. Are you sure? I thought about the text message. Use your legs. I thought about Brooke's driving record. The DUI. She had charmed her way out of 3 years ago because Dad hired an expensive lawyer he couldn't afford. The hit and run in the parking lot that Mom paid the victim cash to cover up. Brooke had never, not once in her 31 years, felt the cold steel of consequences. She floated through life on a cushion of our parents' enabling, leaving a wake of destruction that I was usually expected to clean up. If I didn't do this, Brooke would crash my car. It wasn't a possibility. It was an inevitability, and when she did, my parents would blame the road, the weather, or the other driver. I would be left with the debt, the higher insurance premiums, and the simmering resentment that would eventually give me an ulcer. I looked at Officer Mason. I saw a woman doing her job, respecting the law, respecting boundaries. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to be a person who commanded respect, not a doormat that said, "Welcome on it." "I have asked for it back," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. "I gave them a chance to return it. They refused. They don't think I will do anything. They think because we share blood, they own what is mine." I clinched my hands into fists at my sides to stop them from trembling. "I want to file the report," I stated clearly. "I want to report it as unauthorized use of a motor vehicle. They are my family. But what they are doing is wrong, and if I don't protect myself, no one will." Officer Mason nodded once, a sharp, respectful dip of her chin. She uncapped her pen. "All right," she said. "Let's get your statement. Start from the beginning." As I began to speak, detailing the make, model, and license plate number, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was terror. Yes, but underneath the terror, there was something else, a tiny, fragile spark of power. For the first time in 29 years, I wasn't just taking it, I was fighting back. The call came at 3:45 in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across my office floor, but the voice on the other end of the line was crisp and devoid of twilight softness. It was Officer Mason. She told me they had located the vehicle. It had not been found at a hair salon, nor at an office building, nor anywhere that a person trying to get their life back on track would frequent. It had been towed from an abandoned industrial zone in West Maple Ridge, a desolate grid of rusted warehouses and cracked pavement where the city stopped pretending to care. It had been cited for illegal parking, blocking a fire hydrant, and apparently, it had been abandoned there for at least 6 hours. I drove my rental to the impound lot in a daze. The lot was a graveyard of metal, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire that hummed in the cold wind. The gravel crunched loudly under my boots as I followed the attendant, a man in a grease-stained jumpsuit who looked at me with pity. Officer Mason was already there, standing next to a silver shape that I struggled to recognize as my own. When I finally stood in front of it, the breath left my lungs in a sharp, painful hiss. My car, my beautiful, 3-month-old sedan, which I had parked with such precision the night before, looked like it had been chewed up and spat out by a beast. The front bumper was the first thing to assault my eyes. It was caved in on the passenger side, a deep, ugly crater that suggested a high-speed impact with something solid, perhaps a bollard or a low wall. The silver paint, which I had paid extra for, was peeling away in jagged strips, revealing the dark plastic underneath like an exposed wound. The brand logo, the chrome emblem I had polished just last Sunday, was gouged with deep scratches, unrecognizable. One of the headlights was shattered, a spiderweb of cracks obscuring the bulb, giving the car the appearance of having a blinded, weeping eye. I walked slowly down the driver's side, my hand hovering over the metal but terrified to touch it. There was a scratch. It was not an accidental scrape from a bush or a zipper. It was a deliberate, malicious line that started at the front fender and dug deep, all the way to the rear wheel well. It went down to the primer, white against the silver. Someone had done this with a key or a knife. Someone had hated this car, or perhaps hated the person who owned it, enough to carve their rage into its skin. Then I saw the side view mirror. It was dangling, severed from its housing, held on only by a few multicolored electrical wires that twisted in the breeze. But what made my stomach turn was not the damage itself, but the attempt to hide it. Someone, Brooke, had tried to wrap clear packing tape around the base, a clumsy, desperate attempt to hold the broken piece in place. It was a childish fix for an adult problem, a perfect metaphor for how my sister handled every catastrophe in her life. Break it, tape it, and hope no one notices until she is gone. "We need to open it," Officer Mason said softly, stepping up beside me. She was wearing blue latex gloves. "Prepare yourself, Miss Harvey. The exterior is only half the story." The attendant unlocked the door and pulled it open. The smell hit me before I could even look inside. It was a thick, suffocating wall of odor that had no business being in a new vehicle. It smelled of stale grease, old onions, cheap menthol cigarettes, and underneath it all, a sharp, chemical sting that made my eyes water. Something acrid, like burning plastic or ammonia. My car had always smelled of leather and vanilla air freshener. Now, it smelled like a dive bar at closing time. I leaned in, and the visual chaos matched the olfactory one. The back seat, which no one had ever sat in, was a disaster zone. Fast food bags from 3 different chains were crumpled on the floorboards, leaking grease onto the pristine carpet. Several red plastic cups, the kind used at house parties, were crushed into the upholstery, sticky residue dripping down the center console. There was a single black high-heel shoe lying on its side, the heel broken off, looking like a dead bird. Next to it lay a brown envelope, crumpled and torn open, with a few bills of currency peeking out, 5s and 1s, dirty and wrinkled. "Why is there money?" I whispered, mostly to myself. "Mom said she was broke. Mom said she needed this car to get to a job interview." Officer Mason did not answer. She was focused on the front passenger seat. She pointed a gloved finger at the floor mat. "Ms. Harvey, look here." I followed her finger. Smeared into the black carpet was a thick layer of reddish mud, the kind of clay you find near the riverbanks, miles from the city center. But on top of the mud, dusted over the dashboard and the seat fabric, was a fine white powder. It looked like baking flour, but the context screamed otherwise. Officer Mason took out a small swab kit. "I am going to take a sample of this residue," she said, her voice dropping to a professional monotone. "I need you to understand something right now. This vehicle was not used for a commute. The mileage, the location of recovery, and the condition of the interior suggest it was used for activity that is likely illicit. This creates a very different legal landscape than a simple joyride." I felt cold, not the weather-induced cold from earlier, but a deep freeze that started in my marrow. My parents had told me she was going to a salon. They had shamed me for not supporting her recovery. I opened the glove compartment, hoping to find my registration and insurance card, hoping to find one thing that was still mine. The papers were there, but they were buried under a crumpled receipt. I pulled it out, smoothing the thermal paper against my palm. It was a receipt from a gas station. Not in Maple Ridge. It was from a station in Gary, nearly 60 miles away. The timestamp at the bottom read 2:15 in the morning on the day the car was taken. I stared at the time. 2:15 in the morning. I had been asleep in my bed, dreaming, while my sister was driving my car 60 miles away in the middle of the night. Then my eyes drifted to the payment method, MasterCard ending in 4491. My breath hitched. That was my card. That was the credit card I kept in the emergency drawer in my kitchen, the one I never carried with me. "She took my card," I said, my voice trembling. "She didn't just take the keys. She went into my kitchen, she rifled through my drawers, and she stole my credit card." Officer Mason looked at the receipt over my shoulder. "If she used your card, she committed identity theft and credit card fraud. This isn't just about the car anymore, Ms. Harvey." It was a violation so complete I felt physically ill. My identity, my financial name, the credit score I had guarded like a hawk. It was all just fuel for her joyride. I felt like I had been mugged, but the mugger had tucked me into bed first. I kept digging through the glove box, my fingers brushing against something stiff. It was a scrap of paper, torn from a spiral notebook. There was a phone number scrawled on it in black marker, jagged and hurried. Below the number, a message was written in handwriting that was definitely not Brooke's. "Pay back next week. Don't flake again or we keep the collateral." Collateral, I repeated the word, tasting the danger in it. "May I see that?" Officer Mason asked. She took the note, sliding it into an evidence bag. "This number. We have seen this prefix before in relation to some distribution networks in the West District. Ms. Harvey, your sister owes money to people who do not use small claims court to settle debts." I looked around the impound lot. The wind whistled through the cracked window of my car. I thought about the white powder, the mud, the distance traveled, the cash, the threatening note. This was not a mistake. This was not a bad day or a rough patch. This was a lifestyle. My parents had handed the keys to a $28,000 vehicle to a woman who was actively involved in something dangerous and criminal. They had facilitated this. They had unlocked the door for her. I imagined Brooke laughing as she drove my car, ash flicking onto my seats, my credit card in her pocket, speeding toward a drug deal or a payoff, completely unconcerned about the ruin she was leaving in her wake. She knew Mom and Dad would clean it up. She knew I would just yell and then fix it, like I always did. But as I looked at the hanging side mirror, swinging like a pendulum counting down the end of my patience, I knew that cycle was broken. The car was totaled, or close to it. The interior was a biohazard. My credit card was compromised. "Ms. Harvey?" Officer Mason asked, watching my face closely. "Are you okay?" I looked at her. I looked at the wreck of my independence. "No," I said, and my voice was steady, harder than it had ever been. "I am not okay, but I am done being confused." I turned away from the car. I didn't want to look at it anymore. It wasn't my car anymore. It was evidence. "Test the powder," I told her. "Run the prints on the steering wheel. Track the phone number. I want all of it on the record." "We will," she promised. "Good," I said, pulling my coat tighter around myself against the biting wind. Because when my parents say she just borrowed it to go to work, I want to show them exactly what their version of work looks like. I walked back toward my rental car, leaving the silver carcass behind. The sadness was gone, replaced by a clarity that cut like a knife. This wasn't a family squabble about a set of keys. This was a long, slow con, and I had been the mark for 29 years. But the mark had just woken up. The insurance adjuster, Mark Jensen, was a man who seemed to view the world through a grid of risk assessment and depreciation values. He arrived at the impound lot at 9 o'clock the next morning, wearing a beige windbreaker and carrying a clipboard that looked like it had seen 1,000 wrecks. He did not offer pity. He offered efficiency, which was exactly what I needed. While I stood shivering in the morning chill, Mark moved around the battered remains of my silver sedan, snapping photos with a digital camera that clicked rhythmically, like a clock counting down the final minutes of my car's life. He crouched by the front bumper, running a gloved hand over the jagged plastic where the impact had occurred. He opened the driver's side door, took a deep breath, wrinkled his nose at the stench of stale smoke and spilled bourbon, and snapped 3 photos of the interior. He documented the slashed upholstery, the dangling side mirror, and the mysterious white powder residue that Officer Mason had already sampled. "Here is the situation," Mark said, straightening up and clicking his pen. "Normally, with a fender bender, we estimate repairs, cut a check to the body shop, and you are back on the road in 2 weeks. But this is not an accident claim. Ms. Harvey, this is a theft recovery claim. The protocol is different." He tapped the clipboard with his pen. "The structural damage to the front end is significant. Likely frame involvement," he explained, his voice flat and factual. "But it is the interior and the mechanical abuse that tips the scale. The transmission fluid is burnt, suggesting the vehicle was driven at high RPMs for extended periods. The interior requires a biohazard cleaning due to the unknown substances. When you add the bodywork, the mechanical overhaul, and the cosmetic restoration, The cost to repair exceeds 75% of the vehicle's cash value. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. I am going to recommend we declare it a total loss, he said. It is dead. You don't want this car back. Cecilia, even if we fixed it, it would never drive the same. It has bad ghosts in the engine now. A total loss. The phrase should have been devastating, but it felt like a mercy killing. I nodded. I need to verify some financial details to process the payout, Mark continued, flipping a page on his clipboard. I need to see your current loan payoff amount and your history of premium payments to ensure there are no lapses. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady today. The shock had worn off, replaced by a cold, vibrating anger that made my focus razor sharp. I opened my banking app, intending to navigate to the auto loan tab. My thumb swiped across the screen, scrolling past my checking account, past my savings, past the auto loan, and then I stopped. There, at the bottom of the list, was a block I did not recognize. It was a credit card account. Platinum Rewards MasterCard. I stared at it. I did not have a Platinum Rewards card. I had one credit card, a simple cashback card I used for groceries and gas and paid off every month. This was new. I tapped on the account. The screen loaded, and the numbers punched me in the gut. Current balance, $9,412. My breath caught in my throat. $9,000. I clicked on the Card Details tab. Under the section labeled Authorized Users, right below my name, was another name printed in bold, black letters. Brooke Harvey. The world seemed to tilt sideways. The noise of the impound lot, the distant traffic, the wind in the fence, faded into a buzzing silence. This wasn't just a joyride. This wasn't just my sister taking my car because hers was broken. Ms. Harvey? Mark asked, stepping closer. Do you have the loan number? One moment, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from underwater. I backed out of the app and immediately dialed the number on the back of my debit card, navigating the automated menu with frantic jabs of my finger until I reached the fraud department. This is Jason in Fraud Prevention. How can I help you? I am looking at a credit card on my app that I did not open, I said, cutting straight to the chase. It has a $9,000 balance. It has an authorized user named Brooke Harvey. Okay, let me pull that up, Jason said. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. Can you verify your social security number and mother's maiden name? I gave him the information. The irony of using my mother's maiden name to uncover a crime she likely facilitated tasted like ash in my mouth. Okay, I see the account, Jason said. It was opened 11 months ago. 11 months? I repeated. How? I never signed for it. I never received a card. It was an online application, Jason explained. It was digitally signed. The physical card was mailed to, let me see, it was mailed to an address on Oak Street in Maple Ridge. That is my parents' house, I whispered. And the email address associated with the account is elenagardens@email.com. My mother's email. A memory flashed in my mind, vivid and sickening. It was last Thanksgiving. I was sitting at the kitchen table at my parents' house. Mom had been making coffee, acting unusually chatty about finances. She had said, Cecilia, your dad and I are thinking of refinancing the house, and the broker mentioned that family credit links can sometimes affect rates. Let me just check your credit score real quick to make sure everything is clear. I can do it on my iPad right here. I had laughed. I had thought she was being her usual worrying self. I had recited my social security number to her while eating a slice of pumpkin pie. I had trusted her. I had literally fed her the weapon she used to stab me in the back. The digital signature, I asked Jason, my voice trembling with rage. Where did it come from? The IP address traces back to a residential connection, and the device ID matches an older model tablet. My mother's iPad. I pieced it together in seconds. Mom opened the card in my name using my social. She added Brooke as an authorized user, so Brooke could have a credit card, despite her terrible credit history. They had the bill statements sent to their house or to Mom's email, so I would never see them. They had been racking up debt in my name for almost a year. hiding it, paying the minimums, or not paying them, and smiling at my face during Sunday dinners. They used me, I said into the phone. They used me as a bank. Ms. Harvey, Jason said, his tone shifting from customer service to serious advisory. If you did not open this account, this is identity theft. However, because the authorized user is a family member and the card was mailed to a family address, this is a complex situation. We can freeze the card immediately, but to remove this debt from your name, to clear your credit report, you will have to file a formal affidavit of fraud. What does that mean? I asked. It means you sign a legal document stating you did not authorize this debt. We will then investigate. If we determine fraud occurred, we remove the liability from you, but the bank will then pursue the person who opened the account and the person who spent the money to recover the loss. That usually involves a police report and potential criminal charges for wire fraud and identity theft. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. If you don't file the affidavit, he added softly, you are acknowledging the debt is yours. You will be responsible for the $9,000, and any late fees will hit your credit score. I lowered the phone. I looked at Mark, who was patiently waiting by the wreckage of my car. Is everything all right? Mark asked. No, I said, but I have the loan number. I gave it to him. Mark punched the numbers into his tablet. Okay, good news on the car front, at least, he said. Because the vehicle is so new, and because you have gap insurance, the settlement will cover the entire remaining balance of your loan. You will walk away from the car with zero debt. You can start fresh. It is a clean break. A clean break. I looked at the two metaphorical piles of paper in front of me. On one side was the insurance settlement. It was the easy path. The car was gone, but the debt for it was erased. I could walk away. On the other side was the secret credit card. $9,000 of debt that Brooke had spent on clothes, booze, and God knows what else, enabled by my mother's lies. If I absorbed it, I would be paying for my sister's lifestyle for the next 3 years. I would be validating their belief that I was their safety net, their doormat. But if I filed the affidavit, the bank would go after Elaine and Brooke Harvey. It wouldn't be a family dispute anymore. It would be a federal offense. Wire fraud, identity theft. My mother could lose her house. Brooke could go to prison. I remembered the text message. Don't be rigid. Family prioritizes each other. They had prioritized themselves. They had cannibalized my financial future to keep Brooke afloat. They had looked me in the eye for 11 months, knowing they were stealing from me, and never said a word. Ms. Harvey? Jason's voice tinny from the phone I still held against my chest. Do you want to proceed with the fraud claim? I looked at my car, the white powder on the seat, the shattered headlight, the sheer disrespect of it all. This was the crossroads. There was no U-turn here. Yes, I said to Jason, and the word felt like slamming a heavy iron door shut. Send me the affidavit. I will sign it. I want to report it all. I hung up the phone. I looked at Mark. Do what you have to do with the car, I told him. Total it, crush it, I don't care. Understood, Mark said, sensing the shift in my demeanor. I will have the paperwork to you by tonight. I walked out of the impound lot. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt lighter. I was about to burn the bridge that connected me to my family, but looking back at the wreckage of my life they had created, I realized that the bridge had been rotten for a long time. I was just the only one who hadn't realized I was walking on air. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs of Maple Ridge with a manila folder resting on the passenger seat. It sat there like a loaded weapon, heavy and dangerous. Inside were 3 things: the police report Officer Mason had filed, the photos of my mutilated car, and the credit card statement showing a balance of over $9,000 in debt that I had never spent. The house looked exactly as it always did. The lawn was perfectly manicured, a testament to my father's obsession with appearances. The porch light was on, casting a warm, inviting yellow glow that lied to everyone passing by. It promised a happy home, a sanctuary. I parked my rental car on the street, not the driveway. I did not want to be blocked in. When I walked through the door, the smell of roast chicken hit me. It was a visceral trigger. It was the smell of 1,000 Sunday dinners, of safety, of childhood. For a second, my resolve wavered. I wanted to just be their daughter. I wanted to sit down, eat potatoes, and pretend that my sister wasn't a criminal and my mother wasn't her accomplice. But then I felt the weight of the folder under my arm. "Cecilia, you made it," Mom called from the kitchen. She sounded cheerful, almost frantic in her normalcy, as if she could overwrite the last 48 hours with a high enough pitch. "Wash your hands. Dinner is ready." I walked into the dining room. Dad was in his usual spot, the television blaring a football game. He gave me a quick wave without looking away from the screen. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "Grab a beer if you want." I didn't grab a beer. I sat at my place at the table. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Brooke breezed in. She was wearing large, dark sunglasses. Even though it was 7 o'clock in the evening, she looked pale. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun that she probably thought looked chic, but just looked unwashed. "Hey," she mumbled, sliding into the chair opposite me. She didn't look at me. She poured herself a glass of wine immediately. God, my head hurts. I am so tired. "Rough day at the office?" I asked. My voice was calm, but there was a razor edge to it. Brooke froze for a second, then took a long sip of wine. "Something like that." Mom brought the platter of chicken to the table. We went through the motions. Dad turned the volume down on the TV, but didn't turn it off. Napkins were unfolded. Forks clinked against china. It was a grotesque pantomime of a family dinner. I waited until Mom had served everyone. Then, I picked up the manila folder. I didn't say a word. I just opened it and began laying the papers out on the tablecloth, right next to the gravy boat. First, the photo of my car in the impound lot, the front bumper crushed, the side mirror hanging by a wire. Second, the close-up of the white powder and the drug dealer's threatening note found in the glove box. Third, the credit card statement with the authorized username highlighted in neon yellow. Brooke Harvey. The silence that followed was instant and suffocating. The only sound was the low murmur of the football commentators from the other room. Dad stopped chewing. Mom's hand hovered halfway to her mouth. Brooke stared at the papers through her sunglasses, her jaw tightening. Dad reached for the remote and turned the TV off completely. The room fell into a heavy, ringing quiet. "What is this, Cecilia?" Mom asked. Her voice wasn't curious. It was defensive. She put her fork down with a sharp clatter. "This," I said, pointing to the photo of the car, "is what Brooke's commute to work looks like. It is a total loss. The insurance company is scrapping it." I moved my finger to the bank statement. "And this," I continued, looking directly at my mother, "is the $9,000 credit card bill you ran up in my name, the one you opened using my social security number, the one you hid from me." Mom's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at me with a mix of fear and disappointment, as if I were the one who had done something wrong by finding out. "This is a family matter," she hissed, glancing at the window as if the neighbors could hear us. "Why do you have police reports? Why are you dragging banks and officers into this? Outsiders don't understand how we operate. They don't understand loyalty." "Loyalty?" I repeated the word. It tasted like vinegar. "Is that what we are calling felony fraud now?" "It wasn't fraud," Dad spoke up. His voice was tired, the voice of a man who had spent 30 years avoiding conflict. "We were going to pay it back. Cecilia, we just needed a bridge. Brooke was in a hole. We couldn't let her drown." "So you used me as the life raft?" I asked, without asking me. "You are so dramatic," Brooke snapped. She finally took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. "You have a great job. You have perfect credit. You have everything. I needed a little help. Mom and Dad said it was okay. Why do you have to be such a bitch about everything?" Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, final sound of a rope breaking after years of tension. I have everything, I said softly, because I worked for it, and because you didn't. I looked at my parents. Do you remember when I was 18? I got accepted to State University. I asked you for help with the tuition. You told me the college fund was empty. You told me I had to take out loans and work. I pointed at Brooke. The same year. She wanted to go to that private cosmetology academy. It cost $20,000. You paid it in full. Cash. She dropped out after 4 months because standing up all day hurt her feet. That was different, Mom said quickly. Brooke isn't like you. She needs more support. School was hard for her. I worked double shifts at a diner while taking 18 credits, I said. I drove a rust bucket that broke down every week, and when I needed a laptop for my senior thesis, you told me to save up. I taped my charger together with electrical tape for 2 years. I looked at Brooke again, but when Brooke decided she wanted to be a lifestyle influencer, you bought her a brand new MacBook Pro, $2,000. She sold it 3 months later to pay for a trip to Cabo. The memories were flooding back now. No longer isolated incidents, but a clear, undeniable pattern. My 18th birthday, I said, staring at the roast chicken. You guys bought a sheet cake from the grocery store and we ate it in the kitchen. Dad fell asleep before I blew out the candles. I looked at Brooke. For your 18th, they rented the community center pool. They hired a DJ. They bought you a car. The first car you totaled. We were doing better financially then, Mom cried out. It wasn't about loving her more. It was just timing. It is always timing, I said. It is always a rough patch. It is always an exception. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. Cecilia, look, you are strong. You have always been the strong one. You are independent. You don't need us the way Brooke does. We just try to balance the scales. We have to give her more because she struggles more. That is what parents do. I looked at my father. I saw a weak man who had spent his life enabling a monster because it was easier than parenting her. Punishing me for being competent isn't balancing the scales. Dad, I said. Stealing my identity to fund her mistakes isn't parenting. It is predation. You didn't take that credit card out because you love her. You took it out because you are afraid of her. You are afraid of her tantrums. You are afraid of her failures reflecting on you. So you fed her my future to keep her quiet. Brooke slammed her hand on the table. The wine glass wobbled. You are just jealous, she screamed. You have always been jealous. You are boring. Cecilia, you are a rigid, boring workaholic with no friends, and you hate that everyone likes me better. You hate that I have fun. You are trying to ruin my life because you are miserable. She was trying to make it about high school drama. She was trying to drag me down into the mud where she lived, where everything was about popularity and looks and who was the favorite. I didn't take the bait. I didn't raise my voice. I don't care if people like you. Brooke, I said, I care that you committed a crime. I care that there is cocaine residue in my car. I care that there are drug dealers with my phone number. The word cocaine hung in the air like smoke. Mom gasped. Dad went pale. I filed the affidavit of fraud this afternoon, I said. The room went dead silent. Mom looked at me as if I had pulled a gun. What? She whispered. I signed the papers, I said. The bank is freezing the debt. They are launching an investigation. They will trace the IP address to this house. They will trace the authorized user to Brooke. You didn't, Mom stammered. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Cecilia, you can't. That is your sister. That is your mother. You will send us to jail. I didn't send anyone to jail, I said. Standing up, I began gathering my papers. I put the photos back in the folder. I put the bank statement back in the folder. I left the table clean, except for the uneaten food. You did this, I said. You committed the fraud. You stole the car. You made the choices. All I did was tell the truth to the people who asked. Fix it, Dad barked, suddenly standing up. His face was red. Call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. We will pay you back. I will take a second mortgage. Just stop this. It is too late, I said. The police report is filed. The insurance claim is filed. The fraud affidavit is filed. The machine is moving. I couldn't stop it if I wanted to. I looked at them. Really looked at them. A mother who would sacrifice one child to save the other. A father who confused weakness with love. A sister who thought the world owed her a living. You don't have to like what the law is going to do, I said, clutching the folder to my chest. You can hate me. You can call me selfish. You can tell all the neighbors I'm the worst daughter in the world. But you do not have the right to silence me anymore. I am done paying for a seat at this table. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Brooke start to scream. A high, jagged sound of pure rage. I heard my mother sobbing. I heard my father shouting my name. I didn't look back. I walked out into the cool night air. To my rental car. I got in, locked the doors, and drove away. My hands were shaking, but my eyes were dry. I had just orphaned myself. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. The morning after the dinner from hell, I did not cry. I did not stay in bed pulling the covers over my head. Instead, I treated my life exactly like a failing supply chain node at Northbridge Logistics. I identified the bottleneck. I isolated the variables, and I called in a specialist to restructure the entire operation. That specialist was Alicia Gomez. I sat in her office at 9 o'clock sharp. It was a sterile, glass-walled room in a high-rise downtown, smelling faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee. Alicia was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my first car. A colleague in HR had recommended her, whispering that Alicia was the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases, she dismantled the opposition. I laid it all out for her. The police report number, the photos of the car, the unauthorized credit card statement, the history of my parents prioritizing Brooke's whims over my basic rights. I spoke for 20 minutes without pausing, my voice devoid of the tremor that had been there 2 days ago. Alicia listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she capped her pen and looked at me. "This is textbook," she said, her voice dry and professional. "We call it familial identity theft. It is insidious because the perpetrators rely on the emotional bond to prevent the victim from pressing charges. They bank on your guilt. They weaponize the word family to bypass the penal code." She leaned forward. "Here is the strategy. Cecilia, we are not just fighting a car theft. We are sanitizing your entire financial existence. We are going to build a firewall around you that they cannot breach." We spent the next hour executing a digital lockdown. Under Alicia's supervision, I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus. We placed a fraud alert on my file. We froze my credit reports, meaning no one, not even me, could open a new line of credit without a specific PIN code and a verbal verification. "Change every password," Alicia instructed. "Email, banking, social media. If your mother knows your childhood pet's name, do not use it as a security question. If she knows your high school mascot, change it. Assume they know everything." I sat there on my phone, methodically changing the digital keys to my life. I deleted Fluffy 123. I deleted Maple Ridge High. I replaced them with random strings of characters that had no sentimental value, just pure mathematical security. Then came the most important document, the power of attorney. "By signing this," Alicia explained, sliding a thick document across the mahogany desk, "you are designating me as your legal representative for all matters regarding the fraud investigation. The bank can no longer call you. The debt collectors cannot call you. And most importantly, if your parents or sister try to impersonate you to get information, they will be directed to my office." I signed my name. The ink looked black and permanent. It felt like signing a treaty that ended a war I hadn't realized I was fighting. "From this moment on," Alicia said, filing the paper away, "you do not speak to the bank. I speak to the bank. I will send a formal letter of dispute today, asserting that the $9,000 debt is fraudulent and attaching the police report. We are shifting the burden of proof. It is no longer your job to prove you didn't spend the money. It is the bank's job to prove they failed to verify the identity of the applicant." Leaving Alicia's office, I felt armored. I drove straight to the police station to meet Officer Mason. This time, The interaction was purely transactional. I was not the confused victim standing in a cold garage. I was a witness providing evidence. I handed over a USB drive containing every voicemail my mother had left me in the last 48 hours. "I want you to listen to this one specifically," I told Mason, playing a file on my phone. It was a voicemail from the night before the car was found. Mom's voice, wheedling and soft. "Cecilia, honey, I know you are mad about the key, but we just needed to borrow your name for a bit to help Brooke out. You know her credit is bad. It is just a name on a piece of paper. It doesn't hurt you." "Borrow your name," Officer Mason repeated, writing it down. "That is admission of intent. That proves they knew they were using your identity without consent. That kills the misunderstanding defense." "I also have screenshots," I said, forwarding the files. "Text messages where Brooke admits she has the car and refuses to return it unless I stop being a brat. It establishes possession." Officer Mason looked at me with a newfound respect. "You are making the district attorney's job very easy, Ms. Harvey." "I am just organizing the data," I said. But while the legal and criminal gears were turning smoothly, the social fallout was beginning to detonate. My phone had been vibrating incessantly since I left my parents' house. I opened WhatsApp. The notification badges were red and angry. The extended family group chat, Harvey family reunion, was exploding. My mother must have called her sisters. "Aunt Linda. Cecilia, I heard what happened. How could you call the police on your own sister? Families work things out in private." Cousin Mike. "Seriously? Over a car? You make plenty of money. Why are you trying to ruin Brooke's life?" Uncle Bob. "Your father is devastated. You need to drop this immediately. Shameful." I read the messages, a week ago. These words would have crushed me. I would have drafted long, apologetic paragraphs trying to explain my side, begging them to understand. Today, I didn't type a single word. I tapped the group name. I scrolled to the bottom. I hit exit group. Then came the individual messages. I didn't read them. I didn't argue. I simply utilized the most powerful tool on my smartphone, the block button. Block, Aunt Linda was gone. Block, Cousin Mike was gone. Block, Uncle Bob was gone. It was surgical. With every tap, I was cutting away the necrotic tissue of a family system that demanded I set myself on fire to keep them warm. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, thinking it might be Alicia or the insurance adjuster. "Cecilia?" It was my father. He must have used a prepaid phone or a neighbor's line, knowing I wouldn't answer his cell. "What do you want, Dad?" I asked. I didn't stop walking toward my office building. "Your mother isn't eating," he said. His voice was thick, heavy with the performance of martyrdom. "She hasn't slept in 2 days. She is crying in the kitchen right now. You are killing her. Cecilia, is this what you want? To put your mother in the hospital over a credit card bill?" It was the classic move. Pivot from the crime to the health of the perpetrator. Make the victim responsible for the abuser's reaction to consequences. "Mom is not in the hospital because of me." "Dad," I said, my voice level. "She is upset because she got caught. There is a difference." "We are a family," he shouted, his facade of calmness cracking. "You are tearing this family apart." "No," I corrected him. "The family started tearing apart the night you walked into my apartment while I was asleep and stole my keys. The family tore apart when you opened a credit card in my name and handed it to a drug addict. I am just the one who finally turned on the light so we could see the wreckage." "We can fix this," he pleaded, desperation creeping in. "Just drop the charges. We will sign a promissory note. We will pay you back $50 a month. Just stop the police." $50 a month? I almost laughed. That would take 15 years to pay off the debt Brooke racked up. "No, Dad, I am not your bank anymore. I am not your doormat. Talk to my lawyer." I hung up. I blocked the number. I walked into a stationery store on the corner near my office. I bought a hardbound notebook with a black cover. It cost $12. I sat down at a nearby cafe for 10 minutes before my shift started. I opened the notebook. On the first page, I wrote the date. Entry 1. Call from father. 11:42 a.m. Attempted emotional manipulation regarding mother's health. Admitted to the debt implicitly by offering a payment plan. Duration: 2 minutes. I was documenting everything, every call, every text, every interaction. I wasn't doing it to obsess. I was doing it because in a court of law, I feel like they are harassing me as an opinion, but a log of 15 calls in 3 hours is evidence. I was turning my trauma into data. When I arrived at Northbridge Logistics, I felt a strange sense of calm. The warehouse was chaotic as always, forklifts beeping, dispatchers shouting over radios. But it made sense. Rules were followed here. If a package was lost, we tracked it. If an employee stole, they were fired. Cause and effect. I sat at my desk and opened my spreadsheets. My colleague, Sarah, stopped by with 2 coffees. "You look different," she said, setting the cup down. "Not the my car got stolen sad. You look intense." "I am handling it," I said, taking a sip of the dark roast. "Did you get the car back?" "The police found it," I said, keeping my eyes on the screen. "It is a total loss, but I'm getting a new one, and I hired a lawyer." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "For a car theft?" "For everything," I said. "I am cleaning house." I didn't smile. I didn't offer a polite laugh. I just went back to work. I could feel Sarah watching me for a second longer, realizing that the Cecilia who used to apologize for taking a sick day was gone. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Alicia sent me a copy of the letter she had FedExed to the bank's fraud department. It was beautiful. It was 3 pages of dense legal argumentation citing the Fair Credit Billing Act and the Truth in Lending Act. It demanded an immediate freeze on the account and the removal of all liability from my credit report. Reading it, I realized something profound. For 29 years, I had thought that winning meant getting my parents to love me. I thought if I was good enough, successful enough, generous enough, they would finally see me. But as I looked at the legal letter, and then at my black notebook, and then at the block list on my phone, I understood that I was wrong. Winning wasn't about changing them. They were incapable of change. They were a closed loop of dysfunction. Winning was about authority. It was about the power to say no. It was about the power to define who had access to my life, my money, and my peace. I wasn't just taking revenge on my sister. I was evicting my family from the property of my soul. And for the first time, the no trespassing sign was backed up by the full force of the law. The modern battlefield is not a courtroom or a garage. It is a 6-inch glowing screen held in the palm of your hand. I learned this 48 hours after I filed the police report, on a Tuesday night that should have been quiet. I was sitting on my couch, organizing my receipts for Alicia, when my phone buzzed, then it buzzed again, then it started vibrating continuously, a long, angry hum against the coffee table. It was a notification flood. I picked it up and saw that I had been tagged in a video on TikTok. The user was Brooke the Brave, a handle she had created 3 days ago. I tapped the screen. The video loaded. There was Brooke. She was sitting on the floor of her bedroom in our parents' house, her back against the wall, knees pulled up to her chest. She was wearing an oversized gray hoodie, her hair pulled into a messy bun that looked hastily constructed. She wasn't wearing makeup, which for Brooke was a costume in itself. She never left the house without contouring. Her eyes were red. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice cracking. She wiped a tear away. "I didn't want to bring this here, but I just feel so alone right now. My own sister, my baby sister, who I used to carry around when she was little. She called the police on me." She paused for effect, looking down at her hands. "I borrowed her car to get to work, because mine is broken and I'm trying so hard to get back on my feet after my divorce," she continued, the narrative flowing smoothly, omitting every single jagged edge of the truth. "I just needed to get to work, and instead of calling me, instead of acting like a human being, she had me reported for grand theft auto. Now I am facing jail time for borrowing a car. I just don't understand how someone can value a piece of metal more than their own flesh and blood. It is just money. You know? You can't replace family. The caption read, "Toxic family betrayal, heartbroken sister wounds." I watched the view count tick up in real time. 4,000 views. 6,000 views. It had been shared to the Maple Ridge Community Connect Facebook page. The comments were already rolling in, and they were venomous. User: Sarah J. Wow. Your sister sounds like a monster. Keep your head up, girly. User Mike T88. Rich people problems. Calling the cops on family is low. I would never. User praying for you. This is why society is crumbling. No loyalty. Sending prayers. The video was a masterpiece of omission. It didn't mention the totaled bumper. It didn't mention the drug dealer's note. It didn't mention the $9,000 of credit card fraud. It painted a simple, digestible picture. A struggling, relatable victim versus a cold, wealthy, vindictive oppressor. The next day, the digital world bled into the real one. When I walked into the break room at Northbridge Logistics to get water, two girls from the accounting department stopped whispering the second I entered. They looked at their feet, then exchanged a glance that said, "That's her, the sister." At the gym that evening, a woman I had spotted on the treadmill next to me for 2 years actually moved to a different machine when I arrived. I felt the heat rising in my neck. I wasn't ashamed, but I was furious. Brooke was winning the narrative war because she was willing to lie, and I was losing it because I was maintaining a dignified silence. I went home, sat at my laptop, and opened Facebook. I knew that arguing in the comments section of a TikTok video was like screaming into a hurricane. You just get wet and no one hears you. I needed a surgical strike. I drafted a post. I didn't use emotional language. I didn't call her names. I wrote 3 sentences. I do not need anyone to pick a side. I only want to clarify that the law does not distinguish between a stranger taking your property and a family member taking it without consent. My financial identity and my safety are not community assets to be used and destroyed by others. Then, I attached the evidence. I uploaded the photo of the police report, redacting the specific address, but leaving the charge visible. Unauthorized use of motor vehicle. Investigation of controlled substance residue. I uploaded the photo of my car in the impound lot, focusing on the shattered headlight and the side mirror held on by tape. I uploaded a screenshot of the impound receipt showing the car was recovered in an abandoned industrial zone, not a workplace. I hit post. The reaction was not immediate. Like the dopamine hit of a TikTok video, it was slower, more calculated, but it was heavier. An hour later, my phone pinged. It wasn't a hate comment. It was a direct message from a woman named Jessica, someone whose name I vaguely recognized from Brooke's high school era. "Hi, Cecilia. I saw your post. I saw Brooke's video too, and it made me sick. I just wanted to say, she did this to me too." I stared at the screen. She did this to me too. Jessica continued. 5 years ago, we were roommates for a few months. She borrowed my Honda Civic while I was sleeping to go to a party. She brought it back with a cracked rear bumper and parked it like nothing happened. When I found out, she cried, blamed the other driver, and promised to pay me back. She never gave me a dime. I ended up paying $500 out of pocket. I never reported it because I didn't want the drama. But seeing her play the victim now is too much. I took a screenshot. "Jessica, can I use this?" I typed back. "Please do," she replied. I didn't have to post it myself. Jessica posted it. She commented right under my Facebook post, laying out her story in stark detail. Then, the dam broke. A neighbor from my parents' street, Mrs. Higgins, a woman known for her gardening and her lack of filter, commented publicly. Mrs. Higgins: "Is this the same Brooke who got pulled over doing 60 in a 25 zone on Elm Street last summer? I remember because you had your 2 little cousins in the back seat without seatbelts. You told the officer you were rushing to the hospital for an asthma attack, but I saw you 10 minutes later buying cigarettes at the corner store. Stop pretending you are a saint, dear. You are a hazard." The tide turned. It wasn't a wave. It was a shift in gravity. The internet loves a victim, but it loves exposing a liar even more. The comments on the Maple Ridge community page began to change. User local dad. Wait, look at the photo Cecilia posted. That car is totaled. That is not borrowing, that is wrecking. User safety. First, driving with kids without seatbelts and lying about a medical emergency? This girl is dangerous. I forwarded every screenshot to Officer Mason. This is establishing a pattern. Officer Mason told me over the phone the next morning. Her tone was energized. The statement from the roommate is crucial. It shows that taking vehicles without permission is a habitual behavior for her, not an isolated desperation. And the neighbor's testimony speaks to her character and willingness to fabricate emergencies to evade law enforcement. We can use this to argue against leniency in sentencing. Brooke felt the ground shifting. I could tell because that afternoon, she posted a second video. This one was different. She wasn't sad. She was angry. She was pacing around the living room, the camera shaking. You guys don't know the whole story, she snapped, her eyes wild. Cecilia has always been controlling. She has been jealous of me since we were kids. When we were 12, she pushed me down the stairs because I got a better grade than her. She is a psychopath. She is manipulating everyone with her money and her fake photos. She was flailing. She was throwing mud at the wall to see what would stick. The accusation of pushing her down the stairs was so absurdly false. I was the kid who cried when I stepped on a snail, that it reeked of desperation. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The top comment on her new video, from a user I didn't even know, said it all. Show us the police report for the stairs then, because she showed us the police report for the car. Brooke deleted the comment, then she turned off comments entirely. I sat in my apartment, watching the comments off icon appear on her profile. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. She had tried to weaponize the court of public opinion, thinking that because she was louder and more emotional, she would win. She forgot that in the age of information, receipts are the only currency that matters. I opened my black notebook. Entry 7. Brooke posts defamatory video accusing me of childhood violence. Timestamp, 4:30 p.m. Comments disabled by user at 5:15 p.m. Witness Jessica confirms prior vehicle theft. Witness Mrs. Higgins confirms reckless driving and lying to police. Evidence secured. I closed the book. My family was destroying itself in public, pixel by pixel, and for the first time, I wasn't trying to hide the mess. I was just making sure the light was bright enough for everyone to see exactly who was holding the match. The poor sister narrative had crumbled, revealing the arsonist underneath. The Jefferson County Courthouse smelled of lemon oil, dust, and the specific, heavy silence of impending judgment. I sat in the third row of the gallery, my hands folded in my lap, watching the back of my sister's head. It was strange. For 29 years, our conflicts had been fought in kitchens, living rooms, and via text messages, places where interruption was the norm, where tears trumped facts, and where whoever screamed the loudest usually won. But here, under the high ceilings and the stern gaze of the state seal, the rules of the Harvey household did not apply. Here, you had to wait your turn to speak. Here, lies were not called misunderstandings. They were called perjury. My parents sat on the other side of the aisle, directly behind the defense table. Mom was wearing a black dress and a dark cardigan, an outfit more suited for a funeral than a theft trial. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue before the judge even entered. Dad sat next to her, hunched over, staring intently at the scuff marks on the linoleum floor. He had not looked at me once since I entered the room. Brooke sat at the defendant's table. She had transformed again. The hoodie and messy bun from the TikTok video were gone. She wore a modest cream-colored blouse, black slacks, and her hair was brushed into a neat, low ponytail. She wore minimal makeup. She looked like a librarian or a Sunday school teacher. She looked like someone who had made a small, innocent mistake. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Harrison entered. She was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and a face that suggested she had heard every excuse humanity had to offer. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the docket. State versus Brooke Harvey, she read. Charges include unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, criminal mischief in the second degree, driving while license suspended, and credit card fraud. The prosecutor, a young but sharp assistant district attorney named Mr. Vance, stood up. He didn't waste time with theatrics. He laid out the timeline with brutal efficiency. "Your Honor," Vance began, "the defendant took a vehicle valued at $28,000 without the owner's consent. She drove this vehicle while her license was suspended due to prior DUI offenses. She then drove it 60 miles to a location known for narcotics distribution, where she incurred significant damage to the property, totaling the vehicle. Furthermore, she used the victim's identity to finance this excursion." Brooks' lawyer, a court-appointed public defender who looked overworked, stood up to paint the picture my parents had paid for with their silence. "Your Honor," the defense attorney said, his voice smooth and conciliatory, "this is, at its heart, a domestic misunderstanding. Ms. Harvey was under the impression she had permission. Her parents, who possess a key to the victim's apartment, provided her with access. Ms. Harvey is going through a difficult divorce and a mental health crisis. She believed she was borrowing a family car to get to work. There was no criminal intent to deprive the owner of the property permanently. It was the same story they had told me in the parking lot. We are family. It was just borrowing." "Mr. Vance stood up again. He picked up a small remote control. "The state would like to introduce Exhibit C," Vance said. "This is audio recovered from the defendant's cell phone, which was seized upon her arrest. This is a voice message sent to an associate identified as T-Bone at 10:35 on the night the vehicle was taken." Brooke stiffened in her chair. My mother stopped dabbing her eyes. Vance pressed play. The audio boomed through the quiet courtroom. "Yo, don't worry about the cash. I totally played my parents. I got them to snag the spare key from my uptight sister's place while she was sleeping. I got the car and her credit card. It is basically mine until I get bored of it, or until she notices. Let's party." The recording ended with a giggle, that high, breathy laugh Brooke used when she thought she was getting away with something. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at my parents. Mom's face had gone paper white. Her mouth was slightly open. Dad closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose, as if warding off a migraine. The narrative of the confused, grieving sister had just been decapitated by Brooke's own voice. She wasn't confused. She was predatory. "Furthermore," Vance continued, ignoring the shock in the room, "we have security footage from the Maple Ridge apartments." The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was grainy. Black and white night vision footage. It showed the parking lot. It showed my father's car pulling up. It showed my father getting out. He didn't walk to the elevator to come up to my apartment and ask for permission. He didn't call me. He walked to the shadows between the cars. Brooke stepped out to meet him. He handed her a shiny object. She snatched it, hopped into my silver sedan, and peeled out of the parking spot. Dad watched her go, then got back in his car and left. It looked exactly like what it was, an accomplice handing off the tools for a crime. "There was no request for permission," Vance stated. "There was no conversation with the owner. There was only a covert handoff in the middle of the night." The judge made a note, her pen scratching loudly on the paper. "The state calls Cecilia Harvey to the stand," Vance said. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my spine felt made of steel. I walked through the gate, past the table where Brooke refused to look at me, and up to the witness box. I swore to tell the truth. "Ms. Harvey," Vance asked, "did you at any point give your sister or your parents permission to take your vehicle or use your credit card?" "No," I said clearly. "When did you find out the vehicle was gone?" "At 7:30 in the morning, when I went to drive to work," I replied. I kept my voice steady, anchoring myself in the facts I had written in my black notebook. I called my mother. She informed me they had taken the key while I was asleep. "How did that make you feel?" "Violated," I said, "and unsafe." I realized that the security of my home had been compromised by the people who were supposed to protect me. Vance nodded and sat down. It was the defense attorney's turn. He stood up, looking tired. He knew he was fighting a losing battle, but he had to try. "Ms. Harvey," he said, trying to sound sympathetic, "you are a successful woman, correct? You have a good job?" "I am employed, yes." "And your sister has been struggling?" "That is what I am told." "Do you think—" He paused, glancing at the jury box. Though there was no jury, only the judge. "That criminal court is the appropriate place to handle a dispute between sisters? Don't you think this could have been handled at home?" He was doing it. He was using the family card. He was trying to make me look cold, calculating, and unforgiving. "We tried to handle it at home for 20 years, I said. The lawyer frowned. "I am talking about this specific incident. Your sister made a mistake. Your parents tried to help. Are you really asking the court to give your sister a criminal record over a car?" He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was meant to shame me. "Is a piece of metal really worth destroying your family, Ms. Harvey?" I looked at him, then I looked past him, at Brooke. She was finally looking at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and fear. Then I looked at my parents. They looked small. They looked like strangers. I turned back to the lawyer. "I am not destroying my family," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. "I am stopping my family from destroying me." The lawyer blinked. "I did not put the cocaine residue in the car," I continued, listing the facts calmly. "I did not drive 60 miles an hour into a wall. I did not open a fraudulent credit card account. I did not steal. I simply stopped allowing them to treat my boundaries like a suggestion. If the truth destroys this family, then the family was already broken." The defense attorney opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no follow-up. There is no legal rebuttal to the truth when it is spoken that plainly. "No further questions," he muttered, returning to his seat. I stepped down from the stand. As I walked back to my seat, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The air was no longer heavy with judgment against me. The tension had broken. The judge was looking at Brooke not as a victim of a vindictive sister, but as a grown woman who had exhausted every ounce of grace the world had to offer. Brooke was staring at the table, her hands clenching and unclenching. The innocent girl mask had slipped. The audio recording was still echoing in everyone's mind. I tricked them. I sat down. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one holding the bag. I wasn't the one fixing the mess. I was just a witness to the consequences finally arriving, decades late, but arriving nonetheless. The judge called for a 30-minute recess before sentencing to review the submitted evidence, specifically the audio recording that had turned the courtroom into a mausoleum of silence. Before I could even stand up, Brooke's public defender, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he had aged 10 years in the last hour, approached the railing. "Ms. Harvey," he said, his voice low. "Ms. Gomez, can we have a word? There is a conference room in the back. I think we might be able to find a resolution that satisfies the court without extreme measures." Alicia looked at me. It was my choice. I could have stayed in my seat. I could have waited for the gavel. But there was a part of me, the part that had been trained since birth to smooth things over, that needed to look them in the eye one last time. "Okay," I said. The room was small, windowless, and smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. There was a round laminate table that took up too much space. We squeezed in, me and Alicia on one side, Mom, Dad, Brooke, and Mr. Henderson on the other. The air was so thick with tension it felt hard to breathe. The door clicked shut, and the sound was like a starting gun. Mom immediately reached across the table. Her hands were trembling, her eyes swollen and red. She grabbed my hand before I could pull it away. Her grip was damp and desperate. "Cecilia, baby, please," she sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. "We can fix this. We can fix all of it. Your father and I. We have some retirement savings. We will cash it out. We will pay off the credit card, every penny. We will pay for the car. We will pay your legal fees. Just, please don't let the judge send your sister away." She squeezed my hand harder, her nails digging into my skin. "She can't survive inside. Cecilia, you know she can't. She is fragile. Please, Just tell the judge you want to drop the request for a harsh sentence. Tell her you want a family resolution. If you say it, she will listen." I looked at my hand trapped in hers. I didn't feel the warmth of a mother's touch. I felt the desperate clawing of a woman trying to pull me back into the burning building she refused to leave. I gently, but firmly, pulled my hand away and placed it in my lap. "It is not about the money, Mom," I said quietly. "It is always about money," Dad blurted out. He was staring at the table, his shoulders hunched. "That is why we did it. We were drowning. Cecilia, Brooke was drowning." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, not with love, but with terror. The terror of a man who sees his reputation about to be shredded. I agreed to it," he confessed, his voice shaking. "When your mother said she needed a credit card for Brooke but couldn't get approved, I told her to use your information. I told her to use my email for the verification so you wouldn't get the alerts. I truly thought it would just be for a few months, just until Brooke got a job. We were going to transfer the balance. We never meant for it to get this bad." I stared at him, my father, the man who taught me how to ride a bike. He was admitting that he had orchestrated the identity theft. He hadn't just looked the other way. He had provided the digital camouflage. "You used your email to hide it from me," I repeated, making sure I understood the depth of the betrayal. "You didn't just borrow my name. You actively built a wall so I wouldn't see you stealing from me." "I was trying to protect you from the stress," he insisted, a pathetic excuse that hung in the air like a bad smell. "I didn't want you to worry about your sister's debts. So instead you made them my debts," I said. Brooke made a noise in the back of her throat, a sharp, derisive sound. She wasn't crying. She was sitting back in her chair, arms crossed, staring at me with a look of pure venom. "Oh, stop the sainthood act. Cecilia," she snapped. "We get it. You are perfect. You are the victim. You have everyone feeling sorry for you." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a hiss. "What do you want? Seriously, what is the endgame here? Do you want to see me in an orange jumpsuit? Do you want to come visit me through glass? Will that finally make you feel big enough? You are enjoying this, aren't you? You love seeing Mom and Dad beg?" "Mr. Henderson put a hand on Brooke's arm to silence her, but she shook it off. "She doesn't care about the money," Brooke spat. "She just wants to win. She wants to be the only Harvey left standing." "Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, trying to salvage the negotiation. "Ms. Harvey," he said to me, ignoring his client's outburst, "here is the proposal. Your parents are willing to sign a binding agreement to assume the full $9,000 of debt plus interest. They will liquidate assets to pay you the value of the vehicle immediately. In exchange, you simply write a letter to Judge Harrison stating that you do not wish for your sister to be incarcerated and that you are satisfied with civil restitution. If you do this, the judge will likely suspend the sentence and order probation. Everyone goes home today." The room went silent. It was the easy button. It was the exit ramp. I could sign the paper. I could get my money back. I could stop the tears, stop the screaming, stop the crushing guilt that was radiating off my mother like heat from a radiator. I could go back to being the good daughter who fixed things. The inner child in me, the little girl who just wanted her parents to be proud of her, was screaming to take the deal. Just take it. Let them off the hook. They are suffering. Look at them. But then I looked at the manila folder in front of Alicia. I thought about the white powder on the passenger seat. I thought about the threatening note from the drug dealer. I thought about the reckless driving record. And I thought about the text message. "Use your legs." I took a deep breath. I looked at my parents. "I have one question," I said, "and I want an honest answer. If you lie to me right now, I walk out." Mom nodded eagerly. "Anything. Ask anything." "If Officer Mason hadn't found the car," I said slowly, "and if I hadn't found the credit card on my app, would you have told me?" I looked at Dad. "Would you have come to me next week and said, 'Cecilia, we opened a card in your name 9 months ago'?" I looked at Mom. "Would you have told me Brooke was driving around with drugs in the car I pay for?" I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The silence stretched out, agonizing and absolute. Dad looked at his shoes. Mom opened her mouth to speak, then closed it, realizing that any lie she told would be transparent. Brooke just looked at the wall, bored. They wouldn't have told me. They would have kept using the card until it maxed out. They would have let me pay the insurance on a car that was being used for drug runs. They would have drained me dry and then blamed me for not having enough blood. The realization settled in my chest, cold and heavy as a stone. This wasn't a mistake. It was a parasitic infection. And you don't negotiate with a parasite. You remove it. That is what I thought, I said. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Cecilia? Mom whispered, the panic rising in her voice again. Cecilia, sit down. We can work this out. No, I said. We can't. I looked at the lawyer. There is no deal. I am not writing a letter. I am not asking for leniency. The court has the facts. Let the court decide. You ungrateful little... Brooke started, rising from her chair. Sit down. Brooke, I said, cutting her off with a voice so sharp it surprised even me. I am not doing this to win. I am not doing this because I hate you. I am doing this because for 29 years, no one in this room has ever let you feel the floor when you fall. You think gravity is optional. Today, you are going to learn that it isn't. I turned to my parents. I don't want your retirement money, I said. I want you to understand that you cannot buy your way out of respecting me. You asked what I want? I want to know that at least once in the history of this family, an action had a consequence that wasn't paid for by me. Cecilia, you are making a mistake, Dad called out, his voice cracking. You are destroying us. I am saving myself, I corrected him. I walked toward the door. Alicia was already there, holding it open, a look of fierce approval on her face. I paused at the threshold. I looked back one last time. Mom was burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad was staring at me with a look of gray, ash-colored defeat. And Brooke? Brooke wasn't crying. She was looking right at me, and for a split second, a smile flickered across her face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a twisted, half-moon smirk of pure, distilled hatred. It was the look of someone who would burn the world down before she admitted she was holding the matches. That look confirmed everything. If I had signed that paper, she would have been laughing about it by dinner time. She would have called me a sucker. I turned my back on them. Let's go, I said to Alicia. We walked out of the suffocating little room and back into the hallway of the courthouse. The air out there felt thinner, cooler. I felt a phantom weight lift off my shoulders, the weight of 3 adults I had been carrying since I was a child. I had dropped them. Finally, I had dropped them, and I didn't look back to see if they landed on their feet. We walked back into the courtroom, and the atmosphere had shifted from tense to heavy. It felt like the air pressure before a tornado touches down. Judge Harrison was already seated, her face composed of granite and patience. She looked at the empty space on the desk where a signed plea agreement would have been, and then she looked at Mr. Henderson. He shook his head slightly, a gesture of defeat. There was no deal. The safety net had been cut. Very well, Judge Harrison said. Her voice did not echo. It simply filled the room, leaving no space for argument. Since no agreement has been reached, I am prepared to render a decision based on the evidence presented, the testimony of the victim, and the defendant's prior history. She put on a pair of reading glasses and picked up a file. I watched her eyes scan the pages. Every rustle of paper sounded like a thunderclap in the silent room. Ms. Harvey, the judge addressed Brooke directly. Brooke stood up, her legs shaking so visibly that I could see the fabric of her trousers trembling. I have reviewed your driving abstract. 4 accidents in 5 years. A charge of driving under the influence that was reduced to reckless driving, a hit and run involving a parked vehicle, and now, operating a vehicle without a license, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and credit card fraud. The judge lowered the file and looked over her glasses. Your attorney has tried to paint this as a family dispute. He has tried to characterize this as a sister helping a sister, but the evidence tells a different story. You drove 60 miles to a location associated with narcotics distribution. You had residue of a controlled substance in the vehicle. You incurred nearly $10,000 of debt in your sister's name without her knowledge. This is not a mistake. Ms. Harvey, a mistake is forgetting to use your turn signal. This is a pattern of predation. You have treated the law as a suggestion and your family as a resource to be exploited. Brooke let out a small sob, but the judge did not soften. The court cannot ignore the escalation of your behavior, Judge Harrison continued. If I let you walk out of here with a slap on the wrist today, the next time you appear in my courtroom, it will likely be for vehicular manslaughter. I am not going to let that happen. My parents were holding hands so tightly their knuckles were white. I sat perfectly still, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Brooke Harvey, the judge announced. On the count of unauthorized use of a motor vehicle and the associated fraud charges, I sentence you to 30 days in the county correctional facility, effective immediately. A gasp ripped through the room. It came from my mother. It was a wet, tearing sound of pure shock. 30 days. It wasn't life in prison, but for a girl who had never spent a night without a feather pillow, it was an eternity. Following your release, the judge continued, relentless. You will serve 5 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to complete a 12-week aggressive driving course and 50 hours of community service. You will attend mandatory financial responsibility counseling. Your driver's license is hereby revoked for a period of 2 years. The judge turned a page. Regarding restitution, you are ordered to pay Cecilia Harvey the full amount of the insurance deductible, plus the legal fees associated with this case, and the full balance of the fraudulent credit card debt. A garnishment order will be placed on any future wages you earn until this debt is satisfied. Then, the judge looked at me. For a fleeting second, her expression softened. Finally, she said, I am issuing a permanent order of protection. Brooke Harvey, you are to have no contact with Cecilia Harvey, no phone calls, no text messages, no social media interaction, no third-party contact. You are to stay 500 feet away from her residence and her place of employment. If you violate this order, you will be returned to jail immediately. Do you understand? Yes, Brooke whispered, her voice barely audible. The gavel came down, bang. It was the cleanest sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a door locking. It sounded like safety. 2 bailiffs moved in. They asked Brooke to place her hands behind her back. I watched as the metal cuffs clicked around her wrists. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at Mom, her eyes wide with panic, pleading for a rescue that wasn't coming. Dad had his head in his hands. I stood up. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel the urge to cheer. I just felt a massive, expansive emptiness in my chest where the anxiety used to be. The knot that had been in my stomach for 29 years had finally untied itself. I walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Alicia squeezed my shoulder. You did good, she said softly. It is over. The courtroom doors swung open behind us, and my parents stumbled out. Mom looked like she had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. Her makeup was streaked, her eyes wild. When she saw me, she stopped. For a moment, I thought she might scream. I thought she might strike me. Instead, she just looked at me with a profound, breaking sadness. 30 days, she choked out. She is going to jail. Cecilia, my baby is going to jail. She committed a crime, Mom, I said calmly. Was it worth it? She asked, her voice trembling with accusation. Was the car worth it? Was the money worth it? Look at us. We are destroyed. You have no sister. You have no parents. Was it worth it? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had prioritized her own comfort over my safety for my entire life. I looked at the man standing behind her who had stolen my keys in the dark. No, I said. None of this was worth it. I would have given anything to have a family that loved me enough not to rob me. But you didn't give me that choice. I took a step closer to her, ensuring she heard every word. And if I hadn't stopped it today, I said, next time it wouldn't have been my car. It would have been my credit score forever. It would have been my sanity. It would have been my life. So yes, saving my own life was worth it. I turned around. I didn't say goodbye. There was no need. The judge had already said it for me. 3 weeks later, a check arrived in the mail from the insurance company. It was for the full market value of the silver sedan. It was a significant amount of money, enough to clear the loan and have a healthy down payment left over. I didn't go back to the dealership in Maple Ridge. I took a Saturday and drove 40 miles to a town called Bloomington. I went to a small dealership that smelled of popcorn and new tires. I didn't call Dad to ask for advice on negotiation. I didn't call Mom to ask which color she liked. I picked out a crossover. It was charcoal gray, the color of a storm cloud that has passed. It was sturdy. It was practical. It had a backup camera and blind spot monitoring, systems designed to see the things coming at you that you might miss. I sat in the finance office and signed the papers. Owner: Cecilia Harvey. No co-signers, no authorized users, just me. When the salesman handed me the keys, 2 fobs, heavy and cool in my palm, I felt a strange vibration in my hand. It was ownership. True, unadulterated ownership. I drove the new car off the lot. The engine hummed quietly. The new leather smell was sharp and clean, untainted by smoke or fast food or betrayal. I drove back toward Maple Ridge. It was late afternoon, and the sun was setting, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. As I approached the exit for my parents' neighborhood, I instinctively slowed down. I could turn right. I could drive down Oak Street. I could pull up to the house. I could knock on the door. I could try to explain. I could try to bridge the gap, to tell them I forgave them, to try and salvage the wreckage. The pull was strong. It was the gravity of biology, the desperate human need to belong to a pack. I stopped the car at the stop sign at the end of the ramp. My blinker clicked rhythmically. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I looked at the road leading to their house. It looked the same as it always did. But I knew that house was no longer a home. It was a trap that I had chewed my leg off to escape. I put my hand on the gear shift. I thought about Brooke in her cell, finally learning that actions have equal and opposite reactions. I thought about my credit report, now frozen and secure. I thought about my apartment, where the locks had been changed and the code was known only to me. I flipped the turn signal off. I accelerated straight ahead. I drove past the exit. I watched the neighborhood fade into the rearview mirror, shrinking until it was just a blur of trees and rooftops. And then, nothing. I drove to my new apartment complex on the other side of the city. I parked in my spot 4B. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for a moment. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. There was no mud. There was no white powder. There were no ghosts. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about watching Brooke get handcuffed. It wasn't about seeing my parents cry. Those were just the messy byproducts of justice. Real revenge was this. It was the quiet. It was the safety. It was the knowledge that when I walked into my apartment and put my keys in the bowl, they would stay there. It was the realization that my life was a fortress that I had built, and for the first time in 29 years, the drawbridge was up. I got out of the car, locked it, and walked toward the elevator. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was finally completely driving my own life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to read your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach more people.